What's up, world?
I just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
They
Insert here.
Yo.
It's a terrible game. Bottom line. It's terrible in every way. Graphically, it's terrible. Gameplay is terrible. It's just terrible.
Angry Nick mad.
That game sucked, and it's gonna suck no matter how many revisions they make, and it just sucked even more because they put a Kinect with it.
Angry Nick mad. Or if there's violence, I'll just laugh and enjoy the fun.
Kaz Hazari.
Kaz Harai.
They just kind of got tired of Angry Nick on the first one and said, I'm going to pass.
Oh, yeah, so I do.
It's me.
Precisely.
No.
I
No.
do all my work.
No.
And
You
unfortunately,
guys are
I
so
don't.
cute.
Oh, thank you. I try.
I mean, let's face it, Mario and to a lesser extent Zelda is what carries Nintendo at this point.
Always be radical.
I love you, little podcast. You're the bestest thing ever. For the promise of a new Super Smash Bros. And the Zelda game, yes.
You will not find a better story presented in any other game genre, in my personal opinion. Like, JRPGs have that. They have that story.
That's what the entire game felt like. Oh my god, I want to bang my head into a wall.
It's a podcast again? Can someone remind me? I thought it was a video game podcast.
You're listening to the Game Source Podcast.
Keep it to a minimum. Oh,
We're
believe me,
live.
we are live. This is a lot easier. We've gone to many times before, especially with one of the great pleasures in life is always seeing Nick squirm while he's trying to get something on the air, and whole podcasts and whole hours wasted because of it. But we're here now. The wonders of technology. We're almost catching up to the 21st century, actually. It's Gerald, better known as Yes Elvis Lives, and I'm here with two great staff members here with me tonight talking the Game Source Podcast number 107. It's first off, you look so happy here.
I'm never happy. This is Aaron, OSU Water Polo, here to annoy Gerald as much as possible.
And you do a fine job at that, sir. And we also have, I just want to make sure everybody knows we have a great guest again, one of our awesome newest staff members. It's Adam.
Hooray! Yep, I'm Adam Croft, and I'm here to talk, I guess.
Sorry for my giddiness. When we have problems of a technical nature, it usually lasts for 90 minutes to 3 hours. So anything under that is a good it's a step in the right direction for us. But
this one only lasted 27 minutes.
Yes.
So low for us.
Yes. So if you're joining us now on our live Google Hangouts podcast, we appreciate you coming in. If you are listening to this as a recorded, either via our YouTube page or listening to it on MP3, please, as always, welcome. Again, we're GameSource, better known as www.yourgamesource.com. GameSource on Facebook. Please like us because we get really lonely sometimes. And, of course, also you can follow us on the Twitter at GameSource. So, guys, I think I'll start off this evening. It's almost to the day, 30 days ago, when the world was supposedly should have been put on as a different axis with the release of Destiny. And yes, I'm kind of mocking in my tone as regarding the actual eventuality of what Destiny has become, for good and bad reasons. Guys, I know there's a lot people have said about Destiny. I will say this. Whether you think it's fair or not fair out there, people, it is probably, in my opinion, in all my years of covering the video game scene, the most scrutinized video game title ever. And if you can find one that's been more scrutinized than that, than Destiny, then please inform me, because I don't think there ever has been. Every single detail from before the game to as the game got released, the alpha, and then also once the game got released, so much scrutiny has been taken, as far as from bugs to loot caves to raids to DLC to this leaking and that leaking and these firings and these disappointments and these highs and these lows and these sales. Ultimately, guys, I throw the question out to you, and I'm going to start off with you, Adam. What do you think in the first 30 days the legacy has been for Destiny?
That's a great question, and one I probably don't have an answer to. It's not really my type of game, aside from just hearing random bits and pieces about it. Yeah, I didn't really follow it too much. Yeah, it's been hyped up. It's understandable. But yeah, I can't really comment on much else because I haven't played the game or anything like that.
And well, actually, that in a nutshell is right there part of the issue, because you're an avid gamer like myself. And did you get a chance to even get into the alpha or the beta beforehand?
Just something that didn't interest me, so I never tried.
And that's another issue with that, because Activision and Bungie, collaborating on this, it should have been a slam dunk. It should have been a home run, whatever vernacular you want to use. It just really has disappointed.
I just don't see that. I never thought the game was going to do as well as everybody thought it was, because at its core, it's an MMO shooter. Shooter fans live and die in a 2-week period. They play their game for 2 weeks, and then the next big shooter comes out and they grab that, or they got bored of it. And it's also the same way in the MMO space. So I never understood how anybody ever thought this game was going to do as amazing as they thought it was going to. I mean, yes, it's got all sorts of amazing features. It's got amazing graphics and whatnot, but other than World of Warcraft, maybe Guild Wars, some of the free-to-plays, there really have not been very many games that have lasted more than, the launch period. They come out, and then they go basically, this doesn't have a subscription, but they basically go to a free-to-play model where you have to buy the DLC. Well, they started out at that. They didn't even have the ability to downsize. I mean, they already started at what most MMO gamers call second-tier MMOs, at the free-to-play model. I mean, yes, you have to buy the game originally, even in most of the free-to-play games, but there's no patches, there's no decent patches. The expansions are coming. A lot of it's going to DLC from what I hear. I never thought this game was going to do, the 10 million players that they wanted it to do, and being able to consistently have those 10 million players. So I just never was thrilled with the idea behind the game. And 500 million for an MMO is useless to me, because it just has no chance of being amazing.
Well, with that being said, I just have concerns and reservations about the game as a whole leading into it. I had played over, like I said before, over 10 hours of the beta, and while it was a definitive improvement over the alpha, I had stated that for me, even as a hardcore gamer, as someone who has played extensively the Halo franchise, it just didn't connect with me on something that I had to have. Seeing its release and observing and playing actually a few hours of it and observing many more hours, I've come to realize, the game itself, once you get to a certain level, is actually truly functional, a truly teamwork-based, enjoyable, great time. But the problem is to get there, that's the issue. And the grinding and the farming that's necessary to advance in that series makes it quite almost disappointing, because the story that's trying to lead you through this is really has been a letdown. I think is probably the biggest part of why Destiny, even after such a hot start, is ultimately at this point, unless it's had some a whole drastic change here and there as far as the functionality of it, is not going to meet up to Activision standards or expectations. It's because that story itself is very weak and does not drive the player forward and does not want, unless you're really, really committed to the actual gameplay itself, is not going to allow for the player to stay interested and stay vested until you get to the point where it does become really exciting for the player to get involved with the game, because some of those raids and some of the group, how should I say, the co-op play and things of that nature, those are really, really exciting once you get to a much higher level. I was watching the raid with the Vault Glass, the latest DLC that was added, and it was truly an impressive sight to see six individuals, I think either 28, 29, or level 30 themselves, all high-ranking, working as a cohesive unit as wave after wave of enemies that were 29, level 30 and beyond, we're just throwing everything at them and giving them a legitimately hard time, giving them a non-stop, continuous action without a break, which is absolutely what you want as a player, that adrenaline rush. But the problem is, to get there, you need to go through such a substantial amount of crap, for lack of a better word. It's truly, for most players, they will never even see remotely those options. So
that's how most MMOs are, though. I mean, World of Warcraft, even in vanilla, you had to go 1 to 60 and then do dungeons before you got into raids. And now with Warlords of Draenor coming out in just over a month, you're gonna have to go 1 to 100 before you ever see that end game content, and the end game content completely changes the game. Most reviewers for Destiny and most individual players, their attention span, it's a shooter game on paper. That's what they're kind of putting it out there as, is a shooter game. They're trying to get all the COD, the Halo, the Battlefield, Counter-Strike fans to play the game. The problem is, it has too many MMO mechanics for that genre, which has a very short attention span when it comes to shooters. I'm not trying to say shooter fans have a short attention span. I'm saying they have a short attention span when it comes to shooters. And so, they're never going to hit, I believe, level 20 is where endgame starts in Destiny. They're never going to hit that level 20 to start, gearing up, the process and doing things like that. It's extremely hard to gear up in that game, which is why people, found the loot cave, and every time you joined a game, everybody shoot the cave, and you'd shoot the cave to get gear, and you weren't actually playing the game. So that shortens their attention span even more, even if they manage to make it there, because where's the fun in shooting a cave? Warcraft has had that problem where the content isn't fun for new players, and so they made it cheesy, and now the hardcore players got upset, and so they have added, like challenge modes and things like that, where it's, insanely hard to do on a timer, things like that. And I would like, the closest game to Destiny for me is Borderlands, and I would never want to see that as an MMO. It's a very loot-driven game, and 4 players.
But the game doesn't roll as fluidly as Borderlands, which I think to many is part of the problem.
Yeah, if you're gonna go ahead and put yourself out there as a shooter MMO, minimum it has to be as good as Borderlands 1. Minimum. Before people are really going to invest into it. It also has to be a great MMO, which it's not. It's a terrible MMO because the grind to 20 isn't something people want to do in a shooter. You know, it's let me just stand here and shoot this guy over and over. Most shooter fans want to get in on the action immediately and go from there. And to me, like I said, I never saw this game selling what they expected it to do. I mean, I'm sure it'll be profitable based on the initial sales, but I don't see a tenth of the people staying in the game after. By the end of Christmas, I don't see a tenth of the people being still playing that game. It'll either be collecting dust or traded in, and that's a problem for an MMO. I mean,
but that, no doubt.
WoW's cut down like 40% from its max, and people are saying it's failing, and that's at 40%. When it's going to be cut 90% in Destiny, it's going to be over, and I don't see anybody investing in a second one, or at least not the same style of game.
No, and I don't think. Well, that's what I wanted to actually ask Adam. Is there anything that you think that Activision and Bungie can do to spice up Destiny, which would make it enticing to someone such as yourself who has yet to play the game?
That's a bit of a hard thing to say. It kind of really combines two of the genres that I don't really enjoy. I'm not a shooter fan, and I'm not an MMO fan. So it's got, for me, for someone like me, it's got a steep climb to even begin to entice me. It's hard to say what they could or couldn't do to try and bring me in, simply because it's starting off so far away that it's never something I would consider in the first place. So in some regards, I don't think there really is anything they can do, at least in my case, to try and entice me to play it. And that's just it's just how I am. Those aren't the type of games that I play. So I have no interest in playing those types of games, pretty much no matter what they try and do to entice you to play them.
Fair enough.
So
well, let's. I guess that doesn't bode well for Activision and Destiny as a whole. And like I said, unless there's some really drastic changes made to the actual foundation, a lot of people are going to keep their interest on. But something that there may be some eyes on, and may or may not have some mass market interest in, is survival horror genre. With whether you liked it or not liking it, there's a kind of a revival in the past couple of years with survival horror. People seem to, as far as publishers and developers, seem to want to recapture the magic from many years ago, from Resident Evil and things of that nature. There's a lot of new titles that are either here or on their way that we've either looked at, reviewed, or got a chance to take a glimpse into, especially with Alien Isolation coming out this week. And you have also as well Daylight, which we covered earlier this year, and there's The Evil Within coming out the next week after that, and then Resident Evil is going to be rebooted. Actually, Resident Evil Revelations as well. There's Until Dawn that's coming out. That's also going to be like the teen flick that you can choose your own path, whether they die or whether they live, and things of that nature. And I want to ask you guys something right now. With all this re-emphasis on the survival horror genre, do you see it as becoming a staple again of the video game industry, and do you see it something becoming more than just a niche market for that part of the industry? Aaron, I'll start with you first.
No, you don't. I never, even in its biggest heyday, I never saw it as a genre that people cared about. I mean, yeah, Resident Evil came, and people were, people pre-ordered that en masse and bought it, and it did really, really well. Silent Hill, kind of did okay. I mean, I'm sure it did great for the budget and things like that, but I never saw it as a top tier AAA title really. Maybe in a double A, but just closer to just a big title really than anything. You know, there was Fear and some of those other games that came out back when they were big, and they just never hit as well as they could have. A lot of them tried to be two genres at once, you know. More shooter with horror elements than a horror with shooter elements, and I think that a lot of those games now are, you know, something with horror elements more than horror with something else. And I think that's really the only way they're gonna be big, is to be something else that has horror elements in it. I don't see horror being the selling point for most games. It might be an added bonus, but if the other thing there isn't there, it's not going to appeal to people, because horror fans, you know, there really aren't that many horror fans that follow horror games the way that there are shooters or RPGs or racers or platformers or fighter. I mean, we're talking 20th down the list on horror, probably. There's so many other genres that are well ahead of it in fan base, and I don't think that any game will ever be great as a horror game without whatever the other mechanic is there to do it. I mean, Alien Isolation is more of a stealth game to me, from what I've seen, than it is a horror game. I mean, yes, it has horror elements, but it is not a horror game. It is a stealth game to me.
Okay. Adam, what are your thoughts on the survival horror genre? You know, being that we're, well, almost on Halloween.
Unfortunately, it's another genre that I don't touch myself. I just not a fan.
It's really good at getting podcast people that have nothing to do with whatever we're talking about.
It's an unfortunate thing for me in this case. The first two things we went over, I'm not too interested in, but I have seen a lot of people who are very, very interested and not involved, but you know, they're very into these types of games. I know there's a Twitch streamer that I usually watch, and he'll do a bunch of different games, and then he's decided that this month that he's doing a whole bunch of the, you know, horror of all these types of games, because he really loves them. And you know, you'll always have those people that really love those types of games. There's always going to be a market for them, but yeah, it's hard to say that they'll ever be huge. Just like Aaron said, because of the user base isn't necessarily as big as some of the other genres. But you know, that doesn't mean that the people who do play the games are any less, you know, enthusiastic about them. There are some great horror games that get great reviews, but they're indie games, or they're not, you know, necessarily AAA games, and people love them, but yeah, it's hard to say for me because I don't have much interest in them. I can just really say what I've seen from other people I follow and whatnot. So,
is it something that you feel will ever see more than just a niche audience, or just a focused, narrow group of gamers that like it? Do you ever see something again like Resident Evil 4, which expanded upon the marketplace but was still able to keep a lot of its survival horror roots, as opposed to maybe when Resident Evil 5 and 6, which were just basically glorified action games? Either guys, or Adam, or
I think we'll always see games like that. Whether or not they'll continue to stay like that, or if they will eventually transition to horror games with other elements is yet to be seen. I think where the genre is at right now is a pretty good place for it to be, simply because you get the good quality games out of it, and it's not necessarily something that a bunch of big studios go after and try and make this. You still have your missteps, obviously, but I think it's in a good position for people who enjoy those types of games right now to get those good quality games out of it.
And Aaron, I mean, with Deep Space was something that is very beloved by the critics, was actually a legitimately very scary game, and it did spawn 2 sequels, but it also itself, like the Resident Evil series, made itself into an, for better or for worse.
So they went
it went
to an
mainstream.
action game. And
because
that's
it couldn't.
the problem with any horror game is once it gets to the point where they see the money and they want to go mainstream, they've ruined the horror of the game, which means the horror game is no longer, there. And I don't see anybody taking the time to make just a straight up horror game where the horror is 70% of the focus, without having the big budget. Once you get the big budget, everybody's going to want the AAA returns, and they're going to sell out the original game, and you may have an original game, maybe even a sequel that does really well, but then you're going to see Dead Space or what Resident Evil's done, where it turns into basically Uncharted with a couple of horror elements in there, which is not a horror game to me. It just I want to be I remember when I worked at Target. One day after close, the loss prevention manager kept the store open, and we all played, or they played, and I watched like 100 feet away because I'm a scaredy cat. But they put I want to say it was Resident Evil 3 maybe in the PlayStation, and we played it there, and the dogs jumped through the window, which is always one of the scariest things in any of those games, and our loss prevention manager dropped the controller and screamed like a little girl. Resident Evil doesn't do that anymore. Dead Space doesn't do that anymore. You may have one moment in the entire game where you're legitimately scared and your heart skips a beat. But the older games, it used to be, it wasn't an onslaught of it, because then you get bored of it and it's no longer scary because you expect it. But there were moments that, you felt semi-safe, and then boom, something happened. And none of the games anymore really, really do that. They're all action games, and in an action game, you don't want the downtime, which means you're not really going to get scared because you're expecting something. And it's just, it's so hard to do horror properly anymore because our expectations are built up. It's kind of, horror movies in general have their ups and downs, but none of them are really, really top tier movies. They're all just kind of, there. And if you like them, you go see them. And yeah, there are some great ones, but they're never really huge.
Well, the film industry, from my observations of that, when they deal with a horror movie like, I believe, Annabelle this weekend, they're only counting on it for 1 weekend, maybe 2 tops, and that's it. In fact, a lot of them, they're only counting on it for that Friday release, because as was seen this weekend, Annabelle had a huge Friday over Gone Girl, but by the end of the weekend, Gone Girl had taken the #1 spot for the weekend.
Yes.
So basically, you can shoot these low budget horror flicks for a minimal amount of money, and if you're expecting only a 1 day or a 1 weekend return on it. So if that seems to be why they're still being released 10, 15, 20 weekends of the year. Conversely, though, when you're talking about a survival horror game, unfortunately,
You have to have long legs in
the
it.
budgetary constraints are. Yeah, well, I mean, when you're making these games, whether it's a shooter MMO like Destiny or a survival horror game like The Evil Within coming out next week, you know, they all are within basically the same constrained budgetary concerns. So even if you tried to lowball a game like that, you're still talking about something that's considerably the ratio of expense is still considerable when you compare it, let's say, a low budget horror flick to a Avengers movie, that type deal. So you have to have with these survival horror games in order for them to exist and keep going on. You have to have more than just an initial first week or 2 weeks of success. It has to, as you say, have some legs. And we saw recently with a game that a lower budget game, Daylight, did not meet its expectations simply because of the fact that whether it be because of a lack of budget or what have you, just the presentation of it was not up to standard. And after the initial couple scares that Chris and Corey had when they were playing it, they did not find the game to their liking at all. So I think that the survival horror genre, as much as many wanted to become successful, again, I think it's going to have a hard time getting that one game to push over the hump and become a mainstream hit, simply because of all those factors that are weighing against it. So once again, it's Game Source Podcast 107. If you're listening or watching, we truly appreciate it. Wanted to go into discussion now in regards to game delays. So we'll be going into game delays here in a second. I'll let you guys get your thoughts on that. Or do you guys see any preparation? Anything? Bueller? Guys are all set? Okay. All right, then let's rock and roll with it. Game delays. And over the past few years, in more recent times, game delays have been ultimately more and more common in the marketplace. With so many titles over the past few years that have been delayed. For the most part, most have not been beneficial. This year has been no exception, with titles such as Watch Dogs and Drive Club being, in my opinion, two of the games that are most affected this year financially because of the delays that ultimately happened to them. Drive Club is being released this week. To not a whole lot of fanfare, and even if does score well with the critics, including us, it's still ultimately, because it's now being so rationed out between a free version, PS Plus version, things of that nature. And ultimately the game, I think itself, the full retail version is going to suffer at the sales market because of its 1 year delay. It should have been a launch title. I don't know what problems that were incurred for the team at Evolution that caused the delay, but ultimately it's gone from a game that had some promise as a launch title to something that's going to get overwhelmed here this fall. But that's my opinion on it. And Watch Dogs itself, there was such a huge amount of hype and huge momentum at one time. I was actually speaking to someone in regard to that, and last year as an analyst, and I did think, because of the sales and pre-orders and interest gauged on Watch Dogs, that I thought it was going to be the #2 title of the holiday season. Unfortunately, that didn't. That wasn't the case, because if you looked at that time in October, just before the game was about to be released, and saw the numbers via Amazon and you saw the pre-orders via VG Charged, whatever, it did have a lot of promise, but ultimately it was delayed. Now, mind you, its series is still done well. It's still going to support a sequel, possibly a new IP franchise in and of itself. Kind of disappointed with the way that got delayed, because I myself ultimately was not interested by the time it came out, and I was heavily interested in Watch Dogs initially as a launch title. So with other titles that have been delayed into next year, and ones I had mentioned to you guys in our pre-production were titles like Evolve, The Witcher 3, Batman: Arkham Knight. With those titles and others being mentioned as titles that have been delayed into the next year, how do you think ultimately that affects those sales overall as compared to what they could have done had they gone in their original spot? Adam, I'll start with you.
I think for the most part, the bigger games, the AAA games, they might see a little bit of financial loss there. But for the most part, I think unless it's a really long delay, say a year or potentially more, I don't think it makes too much of a difference because you still have the big marketing budgets behind it. You still got the people drumming up the support and the interest in it. So for big games, I don't think it's too much of a huge deal unless it gets delayed for a long period of time, or it gets delayed to a release window where there's another big game coming out. For smaller games, I think it would have a huge impact because smaller games really hinge on that word of mouth. And if people are expecting it to come out at a certain date and then it doesn't, you can lose a lot of the interest there. But for the most part, I think the big games probably won't see too much of a loss there.
I think personally, when it came to, like I said, with Watch Dogs, I think it did affect it a little bit of the box office simply because it was going to be a November release, and people have more open wallets during that winter time frame.
Right.
And yes, Watch Dogs technically until Destiny passed it, I think Destiny has passed it, is the #1 selling game of the year so far. It's obviously going to get blown away by other titles this year. Such as Call of Duty, what have you, by the end of this year, so it will be quickly forgotten about. But and the game itself was not as critical a success as Ubisoft hoped it would be as well. So whatever fine-tuning need to be made, I think should have been maybe held off for some patches and things of that nature. And the game ultimately should have been released during the November period. But as far as Evolve and Witcher 3, I see a problem with that because now you've got a very loaded February, and their wallets are not as open during that period of time.
Right.
And even though these can be really great games that get enhanced by the delay, I still see some sales issues ultimately because there's so many titles that are being released during that period of time. And unfortunately, they may not be supported like they would if they all came out in October, November. Aaron, what do you think about game delays as a whole and some of these titles that are getting delayed?
I expect them. If a game isn't delayed, I almost sometimes wonder what's wrong with it.
Well, you're calling Smash Brothers Wii U delay already.
Well, yes. I've been saying that for 2 months, though. So some people are saying it's coming out in November. If it's coming out in November, how come no one's heard it's coming out in November yet? I mean, yeah, but I mean, sometimes I think games have a chance to do better in the spring than the fall. So sometimes the delay is good. I want to say Mass Effect 3 was delayed from holiday to spring, and that did really well. One of the Dragon Age games did the same thing. There's quite a few games that have done it.
The Last of Us is the only one that I know in the past couple of years that has really flourished because of when it got delayed to. When it got delayed to June, like Batman: Arkham Knight is going to be next year, that really flourished, abnormally because the summertime usually doesn't support it.
Yeah, but I think if you are a really big game and you come out and no one is around you, everybody's going to flock to it. I want to say there was a Grand Theft Auto game years ago that came out in like the end of spring, beginning of summer, and I think it did better then than it would have done, waiting 6 months for the holiday season because it had absolutely no competition. Yeah, there's less money out there, but when you're getting 90% of the money, out out of a smaller amount, it's still going to even out to be about as much as, 15% of the money over the holiday season. So it really depends on the type of game. I think mature games where parents, stop and think about buying it have a better chance outside of the holiday season, getting delayed or something like that. Because during the holiday seasons, they might go, ooh, I don't know if I really want to get this for them. I'll wait and hear what I hear about it. Whereas, over the summer or late spring, gamers are just going to go out and buy it. It's going to be the only thing. They're not going to have another option in many cases. But I think the problem with games right now in general is everybody either expects you to have, the AAA blockbuster, or it's an indie title. There is very little in between right now, and the games that are there get overlooked because those are the only two things gamers care about, is either the AAA title or the indie game, and a lot of companies just are not capable of making a AAA title that isn't an actual clone of something else. I mean, look at Destiny. Everybody had such huge expectations of it, and it's not. It doesn't feel like a AAA title. I mean, yeah, the hype was there for it, and then it came out and it crashed. That's how a lot of games have done. Titanfall did that. Watch Dogs did that. It either has to be, insanely amazing, or an indie game that everybody's like, ooh, I played this, I gotta be cool. The hipster thing. There's no room for decent games the way that there was on the PlayStation 2. You either have to be great or you have to be indie, and the Kickstarter, things like that, where you have a following, but it's a small following, and then when you come out, you kind of grow from there. Games as a whole just are not as fun as they used to be because they have to have that insane production value or they tank. And I think that's what the delays are, is they're trying to take the game from mediocre to AAA, and they're taking risks, and the risks are absolutely terrible because they don't know how to make a AAA game.
Fair enough. Adam, what are your thoughts? Again, as far as game delays are concerned, is this something that does it bother you? Was there any really game that you sought out that, man, I really wanted that game at the certain date, and then you were like, oh, what a bummer, and then you just never end up picking up that game? Because, like I said, Watch Dogs was that game for me. And is there any game that you think that has been that way for you as far as it's concerned, that cost them money because you didn't pick it up because of ultimately the game delay?
That is a great question. I'd probably have to go through my Steam library to see if there's anything like that. It really depends. I mean, if it's a game I'm really looking forward to, yeah, I'll be disappointed if it gets delayed. But at the same time, if it's something I'm looking forward to, or something like a new iteration of something that I've already played and already liked, I'm still going to get it regardless. And on the flip side too, there's been a game where I had heard about it, and I don't remember if they had set a release date, but I had kind of forgotten about it until it was pretty much on a Steam sale. And I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And then I realized that this was the game that I had heard about way back when. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I actually went and bought it as direct from the developer as I could, to pretty much for full price, so I could support the developer. Because at the time, it was a game that I was really interested in. So, I heard about it. I was really interested in it. I forgot about it for goodness knows how long. I think it was years. And then found it again and picked it right up.
Fair enough.
See, to me, delays don't bother me because I pre-order a game as soon as I hear about it. I go onto Amazon or GameStop or Best Buy, especially now with Gamers Global Mock. I do a lot through Best Buy. But I'll pre-order a game like on Amazon right now. A game gets announced, Amazon puts it up, I pre-order it. Right now I've got 2 or 3 games that don't come out until holiday next year. I've got one that doesn't come out till 2016. They'll probably get delayed to 2016 and 2017. I don't care, because I pre-order my games as soon as I know I want them. When they get a little closer, about 2 months out, I will start looking for whoever has the best pre-order bonuses for it, and not in-game stuff. I look for out-of-game content. I really hate the ones that do, Best Buy has this gun, Amazon has this extra map, GameStop has a whole extra character. I really dislike those. I'll actually avoid those games and cancel the pre-order. But a lot of times, when I see something and I know I want it, I'm going to pre-order it right then and there so that I don't have to worry about the delays and things like that. I just really don't feel that the delay is going to bother me personally. It might hurt the hype some, but gamers are so used to delays now that it really, I don't think it really affects gamers the way it did 10 years ago, where we weren't used to it. Back then, games used to say, we have no date, we have no date, we have no date. Boom, it's coming out in 3 months. We're done with the game. We're just putting a couple of finishing touches on it. Here's the link to it. We're going to start printing the game. Go out and buy it then. Now, I have heard specific release dates in 2016 for games or movies. And we know they're going to get delayed. We just know they're going to get delayed when they have a firm date more than about 3 months in advance.
If it's got Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts in front of it, yes, that's a guarantee.
Well, yeah, and I mean, some of the annuals don't follow those rules. I mean, Madden will come out on that date every single year.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, within a week or two of that, it's going to come out then. Your Assassin's Creed is going to come out in the holiday season. That was bright.
You can see I'm playing around with these Google. You can see I'm playing around with these Google features. I'm like, okay, while we're here.
Call of Duty's coming. All your sports games, assuming they're going to come out that year, because so many of them don't come out anymore. If the annual games are a little different than major games, but the games that have a 2, 3, 4 year development cycle, and we hear about them, they announce this game, we're not going to see it for 3 years. Year and a half out, they're like, it's going to be holiday next year. The summer before, you're getting a delay until spring or holiday even of the next year. And I don't think gamers trust dates until we're within, a month or two of the game. Or in the case of Lionhead Studios, 2 months after the game is supposed to come out, we finally hear about the delay.
Of course.
What was it? Fabled. It took them like 2.5, 3 weeks to announce the delay, and the release date had already come. It was like, what the heck?
By the way, how's that pre-order for The Last Guardian doing for you?
Hey, it's doing very, very well. I don't think it actually ever pre-ordered it, so. That game to me, it looks like a fun game, but I don't see it as a $60 game. You never did. But I mean, game companies expect every game to do super well, and they think they're a finely oiled machine, and they're not. So many developers bounce around in companies, and then you have to retool the game because this person did something and nobody wants them to have credit for it, so now we're retooling the game. I think there's a lot of behind-the-scenes crap that goes on. What was the Kurt Schilling studio out in Rhode Island?
38 Studios.
Yeah, 38. I kept wanting to say 40.
The Kingdoms of Amalur. They had an MMO which went, and then the whole thing went, and then against the they have issues with the state, and they went under.
Because everybody thinks they can make that AAA title that everybody's going to flock to, but they can't. They're not going to. And when people realize that it's not a AAA title, they try and hold it back and make it a AAA title. But if you don't have the top tier talent to do that,
although Kingdoms of Amalur was pretty good, I give it.
It was good, but it was not a AAA title. It was not, BioWare quality.
Fair enough.
Everybody thinks that they can be, BioWare, Blizzard, Nintendo, Naughty Dog, some of those companies that they could announce a game 10 years from now. I would go out and pre-order it because I know it's going to be a good game. Whereas Square, you used to be able to say that, now you can't. Especially in their RPG series, but everybody wants to make the next, AAA title that's going to dethrone Call of Duty, and they just aren't capable of doing it. And when they realize that the game isn't going to do that, they change things. Yeah, they change things, and maybe that original game was actually better, and they've retooled the entire game, and it's garbage. So, I think delays don't hurt the game. I think it's what they do with the delays that hurts the game, because they try and, they take maybe a B- game, and they try to make it, the A+++ game, and it ends up being a D, because they take something that is decent, they take the risk to get it to the next level, and it backfires. But I'm also bitter at games right now.
It certainly sounds like it.
Nobody's made what's the last great, jaw-dropping game that came out? I can't think of one in the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, Shadow Mordor was really a great game for me, but I can understand if people seem that it's not quite meeting their expectations, but I'm telling you right now, it's meeting a lot of people's, and it's certainly going to be what I think the surprise here of the year. And
yes,
I think anybody that wants to go out, whether they say they're ripping off Batman games or Assassin's Creed games, what have you,
and
it doesn't matter.
All those games ripped off the games before that ripped off the games
exactly.
before that, they're all Dragons that ripped off. Choose your own adventure books. And so,
they're all derivatives of each other. So, one last thing before we go, guys, for this evening. Kickstarter recently announced over the past week that that their numbers suck. About almost half, if I'm not mistaken, what they were doing previously as far as funding to Kickstarter projects. Do you guys, in a nutshell, see Kickstarter dying in the near future? I know there's some success stories, and I know, Aaron, you've interviewed some within the recently.
3 of them in the last 2 months or so, yeah.
Exactly, with some our friend Rob at the NES Club with their upcoming hit film, documentary film, which you should go see, by the way.
When it comes out next year.
Yes, Nintendo Quest. And also 8-Bit Heroes with Joe Granato. Yes, and if you didn't get a chance to see the interview explaining the new 8-Bit Heroes, it's right on our YouTube page. It's also on our podcast page. But Adam, what do you think as far as going on with Kickstarter? Do you think it's just for lack of a better term, a fad that's going away, or do you see something more like Star Citizen, which initially was asking for under $1 million, and now they're going $55 million strong and then some. Do you see more projects like that being successful, or do you see it being a much harder time going forward for anybody trying to utilize Kickstarter?
I think it's plateaued, for I guess lack of a better explanation. There's not really a benefit per se to just being on Kickstarter, because like previously it was, oh, you're on Kickstarter, that was the big pull, that was the big thing, whereas now it's, oh, you're on Kickstarter.
You're crowdfunding, you're begging for money,
right?
Panhandling through the internet.
So many people are aware of it now. It's not necessarily the big deal that it used to be. I don't see it going away, but like I said, I don't see it being the big pull to help a project. You're always going to have those big successes, either with games or even outside the games projects. It's really just down to what the individual person or studio or whatever can do to get the word out. You got a good ideas, good marketing team behind it, you can get the money you're asking for. But if you don't, and even sometimes if you do get a decent amount of media, it's still really hard to get the funds you need. I saw a project that was only asking for, I think, like $7,000, and it was a NES style game, an NES style game, original IP, everything like that. Has the makings of getting its funding, 100%, but it ended with, I think 1 or 2% funded, and it's in part just because I don't think they had a whole lot of press going on. They had some people, saying, posting about it. Even Red Bull had posted about it in an article of, 10 best games on Kickstarter to watch or something like that. And they still, like I said, only had like 1 to 2% funding. Whereas they also were on Steam Greenlight at the same time, and that went a lot better. I think if everybody who voted for it in Steam Greenlight had given like $1 or $2, they would have gotten funded. But unfortunately, it didn't translate from Steam Greenlight to Kickstarter, and probably vice versa. So, yeah, I don't see it as the big drive. I don't see Kickstarter as the big drive. I think we're going to see successes still, but they're not going to be because of Kickstarter. They're going to be because of the marketing and the word of mouth that they can get out there.
Good point, absolutely. Well said. And I do think with projects such as Nintendo Quest and also as well the new 8-Bit Heroes, it was because of their efforts in marketing it. In fact, congratulations to Joe for this week actually getting over their Kickstarter goal. Very happy to hear that. And also as well, Nintendo Quest, was able to meet its goal. So their project is actually going to move forward and become, like I said, an outstanding documentary for everybody, gamers especially, to watch coming up. Aaron, your final thoughts on the Kickstarter phenomenon? Do you think it's fading fast?
I think gamers are a little wary of Kickstarters now, that they don't want to fund we want $1 million to make this game, we want $500,000 to make this game, because so many of the big ones have crashed recently. For every Mighty Number 9 that still looks strong and is going and looks like it's going to be a phenomenal game, you're going to get the probably 3 or 4 Yogcast adventures where the guy basically took everybody's money and ran away. I mean, that's what he did. He's never made a game before. He had another full-time job, and he basically just took everybody's money and ran. He says he's declaring bankruptcy and he lost his wife and all this other bullshit, but it's like, you've not done anything with the money.
Just to kind of chime in on that, I've heard kind of things on both sides of that specific project, both from the Yogscast people and from the developer. So I don't think that's necessarily a clear example of someone taking the money and running.
Well,
but
yes.
just
It's not quite-
I do agree. Yeah, I do agree that that
Let's get
didn't
with
work out.
perception, though.
Right, and that was it was a lot of money, and that didn't work out. And I don't think that there was a huge a huge resolution there where the people got refunded. It just kind of the money is gone essentially.
And then you have guys like Angry Nick who call me one day and are frustrated by the fact that we live in a universe where there's so many websites out there that want the best for you and so many others that don't. Comes to me and calls me and asks, "Hey, Gerald." I said, "Hey, Nick, what's up?" He says, "Well, I really want GameSource to go places." And I said, "Well, we are. We have a great following, growing every day. We're most appreciative of everybody out there supporting us and watching us. In fact, the viewers who are watching tonight or the people that are listening, thank you so much. Hey, Gerald, can we go and do a Kickstarter?" "For what?" "To get money." And I said, I'm hoping for his inclination was for GameSource, to try and become more entrenched in the gaming website marketplace. And I asked him, so the usual deal with Kickstarter is if you give X amount, you're going to give Y amount in return or something of substantial nature to people.
We will
And then I
invite
heard
you to
silence.
do a podcast with us.
And then I heard silence. And that pretty much ended that discussion. So,
I think the biggest problem with Kickstarters, though, to totally interrupt you, is gamers are jaded by them because, it's not like pre-ordering where, oh, that game looks bad, I can cancel it. It's not like you can take your money back from a Kickstarter. And while I believe the first, couple years worth, people were still in that honeymoon phase of it. I think there have been some major cancellations. Gamers are a bit jaded. A lot of the games are not as good as originally anticipated. And I think Kickstarter for games is probably going to die down. Now, if Cliffy B came out and said he was doing a Kickstarter, yeah, that thing's going to get like $10 million in funding. But I don't think that, random guy who's never made a game before,
or Angry Nick, for that matter.
Or Angry Nick. But Angry Nick isn't trying to make a game, hopefully. God, I hope not. That would be a terrible game. But, I just think that people's perceptions...
We actually thought of that one time. We actually thought of making an Angry Nick game, but I digress.
I just think gamers... Kickstarter has gone from huge indie to kind of, mid-tier. It's kind of grown itself from being an indie place to where people want to make AAA titles now, and they are asking for insane amounts of money, and they aren't going to get that funding. Nightwing the series, the interview I did with Danny Shepard, it's not been out a week. It's got 250,000 hits in a week. So I think Kickstarter and sites like it can do some good things. The NES Club documentary looked amazing. They're just trying to figure out distribution and legal and things like that. I think it has the potential to do good things in the right people's hands. The problem is people saw, Mighty Number 9, the Star game you were just talking about that made $55 million, Goddess, things like that, where people just follow it in droves and they're like, ooh, I'm an accountant, I can go do that. I want to go get all this money and make a video game because I think I can make a game. I don't think those people are going to get funded. I think those people have cut back. The article I read on Kickstarter recently said for the first 6 months of this year, we're looking at about a third of what happened all of last year. So you double that, and the amount of projects funded is going to be about 2/3 of what was last year. But for the first 6 months, we've only done a quarter of the money that they did all of last year, so double that to make the full year. We're only looking at half. I think gamers are going to be more happy with smaller projects than, the $100,000 plus projects. I think, $30,000 is probably where most gamers are going to be okay with funding. But I could go on about Kickstarters for hours because I think they are awesome and I think they are horrible. It just depends on who is the guy doing it. Danny with Nightwing, Joe with 8-Bit Heroes, Robin J with the NES Club. Those guys made that Kickstarter. They went out, they put their boots to the ground, and a lot of people just expect to be the Kickstarter for Potato Salad, where it just takes off because it looks silly. And, the Potato Salad one blew up because it was stupid. And everybody thinks that they're going to have, oh my God, it's on Kickstarter, I'm going to get $1 billion, $1 trillion. And they're not. People are getting serious about what they invest in because it is an investment to me.
Fair enough. Well, we want to thank everybody who has watched tonight's broadcast, who will watch tonight's broadcast when it's, put up on our YouTube page as a tape broadcast, and also everybody who's listened to this as an MP3 as part of our normal world-famous Game Source podcast, number 107. So for me, yes, Elvis lives. If you have any questions or comments, or you just don't like the way Wreck-It Ralph is behind my wall, please send us a comment.
You're a moron because Wreck-It Ralph is awesome.
Yeah, I know you watched it the other night, if I'm correct. Or were you tempted to?
I did watch it. I told myself I wasn't going to, and it's like, yeah, right, I'm totally watching.
Yes. Okay, so just send us an email, info@yourgamesource.com. Also, as well, GameSource on Facebook. If you get a chance, please like us or follow us. We can always use the love. It's much appreciated. And remember, check out our website. It's www.yourgamesource.com. So for me, yes, Elvis lives.
Aaron, OSU water polo.
And Crocked.
All right. Got to get you a nickname. Or an AKA.
I've got a nickname, but we'll worry about that later.
Fair enough. Thank you for listening, watching, however you've been able to get this podcast. Thank you so much, and have yourself a great day.
Do you love games, breed games, and bleed games? Then this is the crew for you. If you are interested in editorial, podcasting, live events, and exclusive content, make sure to hit us up at info@yourgamesource.com and become part of a team that is dedicated to delivering all the greatest and latest in gaming news and content, all here at yourgamesource.com.